We lived a very, very English life as a child. No one in my family actually even speaks Russian except me. My father, he just fed me 19th century literature. And of course, I read Tolstoy. I finished my A-levels, and my father said, right, you're going to go and spend 6 months living in Moscow. I totally fell in love with it. And then I kind of flipped my life and it became really Russia-centric. We went into our own little world, and, there was lots of people around us, but we just didn't talk to anyone else. He was funny. He seemed really kind. I was feeling very vulnerable. Yeah, I really fell in love with him. And then I got home and I Googled him. I was like, oh my God, he's like Putin's right-hand man. And I've been asking these idiotic questions. He had a gun. He locked the children up in a room. He locked my telephone in a room. He took my passport. And she said, this is just a tragedy waiting to unfold.
Welcome to the New Chapters podcast, where I explore what happens after the pivot. We're talking bold moves, quiet resets, and the powerful reinventions that shape extraordinary lives. This week's guest is Alexandra Tolstoy, aristocratic descendant of Leo Tolstoy, ex of a Russian billionaire oligarch and star of a Netflix documentary, and now a horseback adventurer and interiors curator. Alexandra shares how she blended literary legacy with modern resilience, rubbing shoulders with Putin, surviving a spectacularly acrimonious divorce, and rebuilding from scratch. And of course, we'll wrap with our signature rapid fire round, getting to know the woman behind the headlines. Alexandra Tolstoy, thank you so much for coming on to my New Chapters podcast. And it feels really apt for you because, of course, your literary heritage and aristocratic descendant of Leo Tolstoy, but also because, you have so many interesting different chapters to your life. It couldn't be more apt, really, for you. Just start by telling us about your current, I suppose, your new chapter, because you're on horseback an awful lot these days.
Yeah, so my new chapter, I would say, well, over the last 20 years, my life has been a series of very distinct chapters. I can really break it down. I've kind of played out different lives in a way. So my latest one is not the easiest one, but we rent our house and it's been sold with very short notice, and they promised it to us super long term. And so now I've got to move. But what I have learned along the way, and I do feel, lesson life is all a lesson, isn't it? Is that change of now I've really learned to embrace change, and it's not frightening, and it just opens up a lot of doors. So
Well, that's the thing. You don't actually know what's going to happen next, but doing up your house, and I followed it on Instagram. You do the Tolstoy edit, and it's very obviously Russian influenced, but you've got all your sort of very British twist on it as well.
yeah,
And it's so uniquely you, and you've spent not just loads of time, but presumably money on it as well. And now that's kind of been upended, but that's opened up doors, relationships, as
yeah.
in,
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
yes. And actually, financially, it has paid off. And actually, the FT have asked me to write a column for them about there are lots of benefits to renting. I rented at a good price because the house was in terrible condition. And so the money I invested, it has totally paid off over the 5 years. The house, as would have cost a lot more of it being in this state. And it's also created loads of opportunities. So I was posting it on Instagram, and then I got asked to do different design collaborations. I designed a bed, I designed a chair. Yeah, lots of really exciting new people that I've met through that work. So
Yeah, and we love to see it. It's been really cool. And simultaneously, and I have to say, I'm exhausted by following what I mean, you must have the energy of I don't know what. Like you are relentless, because if you're not in this country, like, in some sort of tornado, you're abroad on a horse, usually in some mountains, most recently alongside Dominic West. I mean, it's the stuff of fantasies. Tell us what you've been up to in Kyrgyzstan of all places.
so Kyrgyzstan, I've been actually going there for 25 years. I first rode there when I was 25, and three friends and we were the first people to re-ride the Silk Road since Marco Polo. And it was a 9-month journey. And when I rode into Kyrgyzstan, it was just sort of like a love affair. I could not believe that such a beautiful country existed. I was very, very poorly traveled before that. And then it happened. So I'm always telling my children, everyone you meet, you like talk to them, you engage with them, and you grab the opportunity. And my whole business really developed in that way, because I was giving a talk afterwards at the Royal Geographical Society, and someone came up to me and said, can you take a group of us riding in Kyrgyzstan? I was like, okay, yeah, fine. That I organized it. And then out of it has evolved this incredible business. And I feel like I have the best job in the world. I love my work. I love my team. I meet such interesting people through my work.
And so
So,
if people aren't familiar with what you're doing, I mean, it's like a riding safari and
yeah,
it's the people of all different riding abilities, or they have to have been in a saddle before,
they
or
have to have been in a saddle, but they don't have to be, like a show jumper or something. They just
yeah.
got to be
And you're camping every night, you're going to markets and giving them, traditional
delicious
blankets and
food
things.
and lovely. And then, yes, and I've done a whole load of designing kind of around the business of the trips. And I think most of all, what people say is so particularly amazing about it is that you get this really authentic slice of nomadic life. You live alongside these shepherds. You don't feel like a tourist just, living side by side. You really are
Yeah.
integrated. And it's just another world. And you come back feeling really reinvigorated and refreshed.
And I suppose that what sort of people are doing it? Because I've done safaris in Africa where, no phones, there's no street lights, you don't see them for a week. And it is, it's a certain sort of person that's drawn to that, I think. Some people are absolutely terrified of the idea of being cut off from, you know,
Mm.
creature
Yeah.
comforts, but also like the internet. Whereas I think that sounds glorious to me.
No, I think more and more nowadays, people really are searching to be cut off. And I suppose my business, because it's pretty niche, it automatically attracts people who are kind of who have similar interests to I do. So I get, well, my latest famous people, I would say, were like Charles Moore, who's the editor of The Telegraph,
Yeah.
and Charlie Bigham, the Pie Man.
Yeah.
Loads of amazing, amazing new friends and fascinating, like totally different walks of life.
Yeah.
So
And because of the caliber of the people and the amazing prism through which you have shown this country, the government of Kyrgyzstan have actually offered you this diplomatic role as ambassador. Tell us about that, because that actually, in a funny way, is actually why you've been, riding around in the mountains in Dominic West. It's not some sort of.
yeah, so I've been promoting Kyrgyzstan in the media for a long time because I often write about the trips, and I have never met anyone who says, "Oh, you go to Kyrgyzstan." They've all said, "You go to Kurdistan or you go to Kazakhstan." I was, no, no, I go to Kyrgyzstan. So obviously, it took the Kyrgyz government quite a long time to sort of get wind of me, but once they did, they were like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing," because no one else is really doing this for us. And I've made really good relationships with them, and it's so interesting. So not only do I travel, but I also I love people and I love making different relationships and connections, and it's really fascinating. It's also very interesting seeing how differently a small country, they only have a population of 6 million, works compared to, Britain, which is obviously a big sort of efficient, whereas there you can be much more spontaneous and much more, in a way, people related because it's a small country. And so they asked me to be an ambassador in the sphere of tourism, which obviously I accepted. And yes, it then led to I'm working with them on Dominic and I, and also Clark Peters, who was with him in The Wire. We've just filmed.
Have you watched it yet?
So embarrassing.
I love this. I love that you're there hobnobbing with the stars of The Wire and you're like, I haven't actually seen The Wire, but he's really famous.
And I haven't seen I haven't seen The Crown either. And also I have seen The Affair. But when I was there, the Kyrgyz, I kept saying, "This is a really famous actor." And they were like, "Oh, yeah?" And I said, "He was in this film 200, but it's actually 300." But yes, I got the Kyrgyz. It's a kind of joint, we've got a production team here in the UK, and the Kyrgyz have funded it, and it will go out in January.
Sorry, but I have to get the goss, and we'll move on from Dominic in a minute, I promise. But, he is a bit of a heartthrob. We used to sing him playing the king, Prince Charles, in The Crown. Was he good at roughing it? Was he happy in a tent? Was he happy in a
Yeah.
saddle all day long? Yeah. Was he solid? Are you going to be friends for life?
Yes, definitely. He's fantastic, and he wants to come back next year with his family. So
Oh, awesome.
no, he absolutely loved it, and I loved that he was really interested in history. He'd read all about the Great Game. He was reading about the Silk Road, so
Yeah.
he was really, because I you don't want to show it at a superficial kind of silly
Yeah,
level.
of
So I was
course.
really grateful that he brought more depth to it.
Okay, so that is what you're doing now, and I feel like I need to lie down just thinking about all of that. But can we go back a bit in time? And we talked about Leo Tolstoy. I know he, he's a distant relative, but I mean a significant relation to your father and to you. And that influence on your life, not only him, but the Russian side to you. Talk about how big an impact that's had on making Alexandra Tolstoy of today who she is. Because looking back through what I've read about your life, is it seems it was something that you were always keen to learn more about. You studied Russian, for example, at university, and went straight off to Russia as soon as you could, as far as I could tell.
No, I would say I was a bit of a more reluctant convert at the beginning, but once I'd taken off, that was it. No, when I lived a very, very English life as a child, and no one in my family actually even speaks Russian except me.
But did
So,
you read all the, Tolstoy
but
books?
I read my father, he just fed me 19th century literature. It's my passion, and I would say it's been my sort of crux in life. And of course, I read Tolstoy, and of course, I read Dostoevsky and Chekhov and other, So I had read them, but that was a very different. We grew up when it was the Soviet Union, and obviously you think of them as two separate worlds. So when I finished my A levels, and my father said, "Right, you're going to go and spend 6 months living in Moscow, doing an exchange," and I wasn't very excited at all. But I didn't really have any choice, but I went, and from the moment I went, and I didn't speak Russian at all at that stage. I totally fell in love with it, and then I kind of flipped my life, and it became really Russia-centric, so
Right. So what was it about Russia that made you instantly fall in love with it? Because again, you and I have met in the context of talking about war and Putin and oligarchs, all of that stuff. And we can come on to that in a little while. But most of my feelings towards Russia are probably quite negative. Although,
Mm.
like you, I've read a lot of the 19th century incredible authors, and I love all of the music and all of the art and all of the history that comes from Russia. But my current feelings towards it are not good. So, give us a different side to what you felt when you first got there. And
I
don't say the vodka.
No, 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 totally not. So I was very lucky because I was living with a very famous actor, and that is the great side of Russia that I think is really probably lost on the West, that they have this extraordinary intelligentsia, which the weird thing about the Soviet Union, it did really preserve, they
Mm.
did so much to eliminate the educated people, but they did have this amazing intelligentsia, which is incredibly creative. And because of the Soviet system, they were actually very privileged. So they kind of all hung out together. So I lived with this very famous actor, and he then was friends with poets and artists. And it was just this extraordinary circle, which was, poor material. I mean, relatively well off, but, they didn't have, it was still, you had to queue for certain foods and you couldn't get things. But they had these, and I couldn't even understand really because I didn't speak Russian, but it's just this extraordinary energy that I think I grew up in the country, and it felt like a very dynamic, creative space, and I think that's what I really fell in love with. And it is really sad that now, my friends are just some of the most creative, amazing, really sophisticated, highly educated people, and that is quite lost through.
It's happening everywhere, though, the spread of that, the loss of basically intellectual curiosity in favor of the kind of Trump base. So it's just spreading. It's horrible and depressing. But going back to your love affair with Russia, you also fell in love with, and correct me, in my notes it says an Uzbeki show jumper, but in my head it was a Cossack. Or was it both?
No, it was neither. But you're right, that both of them have been written, both have been used quite glibly, and people do research really. He was actually a Russian show jumper,
Oh, okay.
but he's Tatar, so the Tatars are a Russian, well, they were within the Russian Empire for a very long time. But the Tatars ultimately were from the Mongols, and but he grew up in Uzbekistan, so that's where the confusion.
Okay. So you were young, gorgeous, falling in love with this country, fall in love with this show jumper, and you get married quite young. And you spend 10 years riding a lot together, having this incredible adventure. And stop me if I'm getting any of it wrong. And I've seen this in a Netflix documentary. I think you had quite a humble little flat in Moscow, relatively poor as a couple for those years. But through your life there, and being this, English rose and cut glass accent, and the rise of Putin, the sort of Putin inner circle were all trying to perfect their English, and word got out that there was this countess that could teach English. So bring us, tell us a bit more about these two chapters, if you like.
So that chapter, we did have amazing adventures. We rode all over Mongolia, all over Siberia. We rode from Turkmenistan to Red Square in Moscow. I've got photos of me on a horse in Red Square. But it was, I don't want to be really disloyal, but he had a very bad alcohol problem, and so it was extremely stressful. And I had to earn all the money, and he would lose money and got into these terrible scrapes. And I felt, and we were living in Moscow, no one else that I could rely on. And it really was too much to handle. And so during all of this, I was getting all these different jobs. I worked for Nikki Haslam, the interior decorator, but we were running our riding trips as well. But I was handling so much. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, can you teach my boss English?" And it was this guy, Sergei Pugachev, who I'd never heard of. And I went to the first lesson and started asking him some questions like, "What do you think about Putin?" Because I didn't know what to talk about. And he said, "Well, we won't talk about politics." And then I got home and I Googled him and I was like, "Oh my God, he's like Putin's right-hand man." And I've been asking these idiotic questions.
For people who don't know who Sergei Pugachev he was known as Putin's banker and was credited with really helping Putin's rise to power, rise to wealth, and was in the inner circle of what we now call, although I don't think they were called at the time you met him, an oligarch, the people who effectively plundered a lot of the wealth and assets of the country, for Putin's ultimate gain. But like you said, you had no idea about all of this. He was a tall, glamorous Russian, no doubt. And, sparks flew.
Well, not immediately. I just thought, "Oh, I've been a rubbish teacher," because I never heard back from him. And then I think it was a year later and things had just got worse and worse with my husband, some really terrible things. And then I found another job I was working in St. Petersburg at this conference, and I was they put me to sit next to Sergei. And then it was like we went into our own little world, and there was lots of people around us, but we just didn't talk to anyone else. He was funny, he seemed really kind, and I suppose I was feeling very vulnerable, and he made me feel like, oh, someone can look after me, and this is an amazing feeling. And then, yeah, I really fell in love with him.
Yeah, and it was an incredible love story. And again, I've seen this on the Netflix documentary, which funnily enough was called, and correct me if I'm wrong, Countess and the Russian Billionaire. And this extraordinary life where suddenly you were, this aristocratic girl bowling around in private jets, dripping in diamonds, every designer handbag, the billionaire lifestyle, which, as you say, having come from problems for a decade and not poverty, but struggling, this was part of the appeal, I suppose.
No, it really was more him, actually. He was sort of electric. And
Yeah.
it was most intoxicating, the connection that I had with him. And I'd felt, yes, I suppose it was, and I've learned like love is not passion or physical passion, is it? It should be much more about friendship and trust. And looking back, it wasn't there, and it became, and in a way, it would, because it felt quite dangerous that I sort of found that weirdly attractive.
Well, he was married, wasn't he, initially?
No, he'd been separated for 50.
Oh, okay.
Officially, he was married, but he was separated.
Okay.
But then it pretty quickly became very, very dangerous. And
Well, I don't want to rush forward because you had three gorgeous
he had 3 wonderful
babies.
Yeah.
And they, again, I see this on Instagram, just looked like little Russian dolls to me. Little blonde, perfectly dressed, gorgeous children, and, quite eccentric.
They're really eccentric, and I am so proud of them because they
Yeah,
are
right.
absolutely their own people. They're not, I heard my son the other day say, "Be a shepherd, not a sheep." And they really are shepherd. They're just so, well, especially my daughter's younger, but the boys,
What are their names again? Because they're beautiful names.
so Alyosha and Ivan. And Alyosha is just incredible. He's 16 and he's currently in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan working. He's working for a fizzy drinks company, distributing it like in the really suburbs of Bishkek. He doesn't know the city. He's working in Russian. He's been paid like a Kyrgyz wage, but he chose to do it. He sorted it out, and yeah, he's amazing. And the other Ivan, the next one, is busy in the CCF, and he wants to go in the SAS. So yeah, I'm really proud of them because they've gone through a lot and they haven't complained.
Right. So what they've been through, I mean, and if you don't mind us talking about it, but I mean, your life, I feel like we could do hours and hours of talking, Alexandra, because it is an unbelievable story. So effectively, Pugachev and Putin fell out, as Putin loves to do. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be in. And, his life was in threat, and therefore your life was in threat as well, presumably, and therefore your children's life was in threat. And you were what, living in London at this time, and you had people watching you round the clock, and bear in mind, I don't know what the timing was with the whole Litvinenko disaster in London, but we know what Putin does when he doesn't like people. So talk a bit about the kind of pressure that your marriage was under.
Well, he didn't actually ever marry me. Yes, it was very stressful, but to be honest, it was more Sergei himself that I found. It even makes me sort of, my heart thump now with sort of PTSD.
Oh,
He just was so controlling and really so abusive that I found it was terrifying. And just to get through each day was a kind of massive labor. And it is just really fascinating how those very abusive people, how they, by putting you down, by control, that you then lose all perspective. Like, you can't think about work, you can't think about doing anything. All you can think about is surviving.
mm.
So really feel like it was just, I was sort of I didn't sleep for 5-10 years, and I just
Just
felt
tell us a crazy story about the man that was outside your window all the time.
yeah. So then in 2015, Sergey just suddenly disappeared overnight, and he didn't warn me, he didn't say anything, and he didn't reappear for a month, and he'd fled to France against a court order, and I was left with the children on my own. And he didn't, despite being so rich, I didn't know where he kept his money. I didn't have any access to his bank accounts. He just would sometimes give me a bit of money. So I really had nothing. And then this guy was following us, watching us. Then I realized, then Sergey started saying, "Oh, come and live in France." And I was just like, "No, I'm not going." I'd already been through so much. I'm not going to let myself be locked up in France, where he has armed guards. He'd got a gun lying around, all sorts of terrible things. And so actually then it was real struggle. It was horrific. He cut us off financially. We lost our home. He hadn't let me work for 10 years, so I had to like redo my business, but then COVID came. So it was a big, big, big struggle, but it was worth it.
And it all came to a head from what was at a gunpoint in his chateau in France, where he was trying to almost hold you hostage.
Yeah, he was. And thank God, look, there have been a couple of people in my life who have, I don't, they've been so incredible and supportive. And one of them is just this amazing nanny we had when the children were little. She's English. I always think she's like Nanny McPhee.
Oh,
Super strict, so strong. She was the only person Sergey was scared of. And she happened to be with me, and she just said to me, "You never, ever are going back after this." He had a gun. He locked the children up in a room. He locked my telephone in a room. He took my passport. And she said, "This is just something, a tragedy waiting to unfold." So that's it. So
okay. And you've never seen, heard, spoken, had any contact, and the children, are they in touch?
No, because we have unfortunately seen and heard in that he sent a woman to try and take the children when I started working again, and I went to Kyrgyzstan for the first time. So, it had been COVID for 2 years. I couldn't do the trips. I was sold all my belongings. I did everything to make money just to be able to live. And then I got this trip together, and he knew I'd had to advertise it obviously to attract clients, and he obviously knew when I'd be there and I don't have phone reception. And he sent this woman in with money, and she said, "Right, come with me, and I'm going to buy you tickets to go to see your father." But he'd really like underestimated, because the children were obviously terrified. And I don't know what he thought, if he thought they would rush and say, "Yes, yes, let's do that." And so from that moment on, I mean, now the police were involved, they watch them and monitor them. And no, he can't see. He's too dangerous. So
Gosh,
no,
what an extraordinary story. And sorry to ask this, but do you sometimes see little bits of him in your kids? Obviously, it's their dad, like, or do you just totally separate that from the children?
yeah, and no, I would say like Alyosha, my old son, he's got some of the good bits. Like, he's really driven, and I can see kind of the way he thinks, and like about business and trying to work out, and that's a really great thing.
And have they been financially cut off, or will he? Does
But they've been totally financially cut off, but I think it's a good thing because
yeah,
like, whose life pans out well and you inherit a lot of money.
yeah, yeah,
And also, I'm afraid to say that his money only comes with insane control. So
yeah,
it would.
yeah. No, fair enough. And so, gosh, what about love life now? Are you happy to be single? Are you single? Are you
Yeah,
looking?
very single. I've been on my own for 10 years. And I'm really glad because, my children are with me all the time. And it was very difficult, and I think it would have been really intrusive if I hadn't just been with them. Now I would like to meet someone, but it's not so easy. There are not many single people around.
I can totally see you doing a sort of rehash of your first marriage, and I could totally see you falling in love with somebody on one of your travels, whether it is one of the, guests that you take to Kyrgyzstan or whether it's one of the guys out there. I just think they need to be able to ride, and I can actually imagine you just basically giving up London and moving there. I really can. I can see that as something you do,
Mm.
maybe once the kids have fully flown the nest.
No, do you know what? I really feel like I'm a half and half person. Like, I love my life in England, and even in England, I love being in London, but I love being in the country, and I sort of can't imagine life without one or the other.
Yeah.
I'm really wary now.
Yeah. Hard to trust anyone.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your split life in the UK? Because you have this cottage in the Cotswolds and you've done that up, similar to the place in London in terms of, lots of nods to your heritage and your interests. And you rent it out, don't you? So, I mean, for someone who's so wary, you share a lot of your life and you open the doors a lot to
Yeah. No, I
people.
do actually, and also needs must.
Yeah.
I couldn't have it if I didn't rent it out, so and actually people are so nice, on the
Yeah.
whole, I'm always just amazed that people are really nice, they're respectful, and giving a lot of people a lot of pleasure out of it. But I think for now, it's also amazing because now we're having to move out of here. I'm just gonna use that as a base and then somehow spend a few days of the week in London, so
Okay, that's going to be based for a while. Perfect. And what about your folks? Are they still very involved and supportive of your life? And what have they made of the various chapters as they've unfurled?
I think they're probably sick to death of it all. No, they're proud of me, but they're not I wouldn't say they were sort of like, they're not involved in it's all me working everything out. And in a way, it's good because it's been incredibly tough doing it on my own. But because I've done it on my own, I know that I can do it. And so it makes you, in a way, it's more confidence giving because you feel like capable.
Yeah, and I suppose on your own, but you've got the kids and,
Yeah. Yeah.
they must be such a source of pleasure for you and, obviously a nightmare as well. That's kids, isn't
No,
it?
no, no, they're wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, good. So, Alexandra, we met, and the reason that I know you is because you came in and I interviewed you when war broke out. And I just watched the documentary a few weeks before the invasion of Ukraine. And then I thought, oh, that'd be a great guest. Let's speak to somebody who's actually, I mean, have you met Putin? Am I right in thinking? Or you've certainly moved in.
I haven't met him, but I've been in the room with him. Yeah. And Sergey knew him well.
So tell us how you feel about the state of Russia nowadays, if you don't mind doing a little bit of politics, because
Yeah.
I
Before.
mean, like I said, unfortunately, I just feel negativity towards it, and that's so sad because it is such an incredible country.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's absolutely terrible. And I'm sort of worried that now with Iran and stuff, people are forgetting about Ukraine a bit, aren't they?
Yeah.
And also, I feel really sad. I miss Russia so much. I used to go several times a year. One of my best friends is Russian and lives there. But yeah, it's terrible. But, people are people, and everywhere there are good people.
Yes, for sure.
They are still a hugely creative people.
Are they
And
still? Because tell
yeah,
me, because I always worry that they've, got rid of this intelligentsia that you were describing. Certainly they got rid of all of their royals, didn't they? And all of that sort of circle of people long, long time ago. But when you meet some Russians on holiday or whatever, they are very tough,
oh,
um,
really?
hard
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
No,
Um,
no, so I could introduce you to a lot in London, like, they're amazing Russians. If you go to somewhere like Pushkin House, really sophisticated, cultured. I've got a very good friend who's an amazing Russian artist, and they're just very gentle.
but how do even intelligent, well-read people get through the propaganda if they're in Russia? I mean, like for example, your friend who lives there, presumably she's sufficiently in touch with the Western world to see and hear what's going on, or do they genuinely kind of still believe in, Mother Russia and Putin's their sort of father figure?
Yeah, and so, like, I don't talk about politics. I've realized that's the only way, and I think their philosophy is, "This is our country. What else do we do? We can't not support our country." Whereas but a lot of time like, the ones I know in London, a lot of them left because of the war. So they left in protest. And definitely so it's things like a friend of mine told me that if in Russia, if you're in church and they read the patriarch's been extremely political, and if they read out something by the patriarch, a third of the congregation will just leave, and it's like a silent protest because they can't do anything, they can't say anything because they will be arrested. But they have these ways. So there is a really significant percentage who realize it's really wrong.
Are you still quite religious in this sort of Russian Orthodoxy? And how do you marry that up with your, feelings towards what's
So it's
happening?
not obviously not political, and the church we go to in London, a lot of the priests are Ukrainian, some are Russian. There's nothing political obviously
Yeah.
about it at
And have
all.
you experienced any negativity or, when people hear of your Russian heritage and perhaps don't know much
Mm.
about anything, have you had any sort of prejudice since the war?
Well, I hadn't until the other day. It was really weird. I was asked to give a talk for a brand on the Silk Road, and then they withdrew and said, "No, we can't because of your connections to Russia." I wasn't even, I wasn't even talking on Russia. So that I've found really, but basically it's really primitive, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
they can't understand that. And also that what connection does Leo Tolstoy have to Putin?
Well, no, exactly. And what about the kids? Because again, I've got a lot of friends who are teachers. My kids go to school with a few Russian kids, and I know that anecdotally there are the odd issue here and there where kids have felt a bit funny, when it's been talked about at school.
And mine's, they seem English. They speak English with no accent or anything. So no, they haven't experienced that.
Great. Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. All right. Well, we're going to do the rapid fire round, which is where we get a little idea about the person behind the public persona. So you have to give your first answer and basically
Okay.
go with it. Because yesterday I was recording another one and they kept on saying both. And I was like, that's not the game.
Okay.
One or the other. Although you could probably have one both. I'll probably give you one if you really, really struggle. But anyway, all right, let's do it. I need to put my glasses on because as discussed, can't see anymore. Moscow or London?
Moscow. But you see, I don't want people to think, oh, bad, that's all political.
No,
But
I get it. No, I get it. Well, I think
others
hopefully if
are.
people have listened and watched far enough, they'll understand. War and Peace or Anna Karenina?
Anna
That's hard, isn't it? Same, I'm afraid. Burn It Down or Let It Go Gently?
Burn it down.
Good for you. Dreamer or doer?
Doer.
Live to work or work to live?
It definitely was work to live, and I say now I'm kind of live to work.
Okay. Gut instinct or careful planner?
Gut instinct.
Everyone has said that so far that I've
Really?
spoken to. Yeah, as obviously the type of people that I'm maybe drawn to. Fancy restaurant or eat around a campfire?
Each round the campfire.
Every time. Isn't that funny? Because when I was looking through lots of pictures of you, there's so many of you, in palaces, and in tiaras. And there you are. I just saw on your Instagram this morning talking about your favorite jobbers and,
Yeah.
you'd much rather that. It's funny.
I
but it's-
would, but I do remember once a friend said, it's about someone had said about her, and I thought, oh God, I hope that applies to me. To look as good up, what was it? To look as good at a ball as up a mountain.
Yeah, that's such a good
People are
ambition.
quite split.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's what makes you interesting. How boring would you be if you only like to go to balls?
Yeah.
Keeping our chapter's theme of looking ahead to the future, I suppose if you want a happy ending in your lovely book, what can we expect? What's next? And, have you ever thought about writing a book about your story?
Definitely. I have thought about it, and I haven't done it because I think it needs to have a happy end. You're right. And I feel, well, I'm in a sort of flux because it's got to have an arc, a book, hasn't it? And I haven't quite known where I'm going.
You've got plenty of material, let me tell you.
Time. But yes, I would like to be able to do that. I'd like to feel I'm feeling, it's taken a while, but I'm feeling more secure financially, but I'd like to feel even more secure. And I'd like to work more on television, which, I've just done this film with Dominic, and I'd like to do more in that thing. Just get more and more interesting clients, I guess.
And I think sort of a theme to my podcast is about reinvention and, God, you're the master of it, all the various different things you've had to overcome. If there's someone listening to this or, or watching it on YouTube or whatever, feeling like the need to completely start over again, what would
Yeah.
you say to them? And has that always come easily or have there been dark times?
Terrible, dark.
Yeah.
What I would say is where I got really overwhelmed was looking ahead and catastrophizing, which of course there was every reason I should have. We were losing our home. Like, what was I going to do? And what really, really helps is doing. Like, you wake up and you do stuff, and then you feel a bit better. And it takes a long time. It's like, training for a marathon. It's real baby steps to get there. But I have really and now when I've been told I've got to get out, I've made like all sorts of practical steps to get ready for it. And I just feel like, okay, that's doable. There's nothing better than doing. It really,
Yeah,
really.
so basically don't try and have a vision of how your life's going to be in retirement, because in that moment it can be just feels so impossible that you almost feel then you can't even live that day. So
Yeah,
just keep it
exactly.
really small and
Keep
and
it small, keep it to the day. Yeah, just taking little steps towards something, and they will work. It will work out.
and you talked a bit about people who've been there for you at various points, your Nanny McPhee example. There'll also be people listening and watching to this who are that support for someone else going through some sort of change in their lives. How do you think people can really help and support? Because people don't always want it.
No, I agree. But I would say, well, for me, yes, practical support was really, really important. And just saying, what can I do? And often there is nothing they can do. But the fact that someone's even asked you is an amazing. It's like yesterday, someone was telling me about grief. If you've lost someone, and they said the worst, but it's so difficult to know as an outsider, isn't it? You don't know should you say something, should you not? And they said you must always say, you mustn't avoid the subject. And it's the same. Like, I would say you must say, because I definitely there were people who didn't say it, and I was really hurt.
But you can understand why some people don't. And my husband and I are completely different when it comes to our approaches to these sorts of things. I'm very much mention my friend who died a couple of years ago, talk about her all the time, and every time I do it makes him feel really uncomfortable because he doesn't know what to say, and he's very British about it. And it's almost like in his family there was a tragedy, and it's like no one talks about it, you know. And
Yeah.
it's sort of like, oh gosh, it is really difficult, isn't it, to know how to support people. I guess you just have to judge it by whoever.
Yes, and you've got to be tactful. But yes, and there is lots of practical stuff that you can do to help people. Um, but then it's also good. It's really, it's like with a child you've got, it's really good to be independent, let them be independent and find their own feet. So it's a sort of mixture, I would say.
Great advice and so fun talking to you, Alexandra. Thank you. And you do amuse me. People talk about doom scrolling on the internet, and I love following you because it's just, I mean, what you post in a week, it's just like crazy, but in the best possible way. I love it. Don't ever stop, please.
Oh, you're so sweet. I know sometimes I feel like I'm jumping from the jumpers to like something so
You are, but
random.
somehow you make it look really beautiful. I would love to post all day, every day, but I don't have the kind of beautiful content that you have. It's very, very.
And actually, someone did once give me really good advice. They said, because I do very different stuff in my life. So that's another thing you can, and that was really good advice a friend gave me. When everything, like I had no job, Sergey buggered off and I had no money or anything, she said, you're much better off having like a little plethora of jobs than one job, because then you're, you know, what's the word, evening out your risk. But then someone else said to me that what you've got to do is you have a consistent tone over those different, so like whether I'm doing interiors or whether I'm doing travel, it's all in the same voice, it's all the same kind of
Your
aesthetic.
brand,
Yeah.
effectively.
And so that helped me a lot.
And sorry, now we've started a whole nother conversation, but I mean, do you get lots of brands wanting a little bit of your Tolstoy, Alexandra Tolstoy brand now?
Well, I felt really lucky because every year I sort of made it in my head, like I want to do one furniture collaboration and one clothes collaboration. And it has totally naturally worked out like that. I've just done this brilliant one with this company called Woven. And then I'm doing one with Nakuku for the home.
Love that.
Yeah, so I'm just so lucky. I do get approached by these amazing people.
Oh, well, good for you. It's really inspirational and it's a pleasure talking to you, knowing you, meeting you, speaking
Oh,
to you.
thank you.
And I hope that everybody's really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. I've loved it.
And just to say, if you're listening and watching and this has sparked a shift or a thought and perhaps given you the courage to turn your own page, I'm here to say go for it and make sure you share this with anyone you think might feel the same as well. Remember to follow me, or you can head to my website, which is linked there. But until next time, do be kind to the version of you that got you here today and be bold for the one you're becoming.